beginning was from Babes in Toyland, and it was a dollhouse that opens from the front with life-size people in it. And that's what my dollhouse from the 1930s is going to be. It's going to be an open front. Well, today what I'm doing is I'm building the bed, a side table for a lamp, and a dresser, and a couple of framed pictures, and a vase with some flowers. And right now what I'm doing is I just cut out some foam board that was 1/2 inch thick that I had left over from the dollhouse that I'm building. And that's what I made the mattress with. And then I put some wood on the side, balsa wood. And I'm cutting out the headboard right now. And I'm using that same technique where I make those vertical cuts. And then I cut around it a few times, and it seems to give a really clean cut and makes it much easier, especially when you cut according to the grain, right along with the grain. Balsa wood can be kind of tricky because it does split rather easily and dent. But I really like using it, but I'm using it because I'm using what I have, and I have a lot of balsa wood. So I'm going to use my balsa wood first before I get to other types of wood that I have. And now I'm doing the footboard, which is going to be based on the headboard. Now this one isn't going to have the same kinds of legs that I've done in the past. And you'll see as I go along what I'm going to do with this one. And there again, I'm just going to use that same technique. I trim around and then I cut the little matchsticks, and sometimes they just come right out. And if they don't, I go back over it again. And it gives a clean curve. Much easier. You could save those little matchsticks for a fireplace or something, a mini fireplace, or I don't know, there's probably a few uses for them. Now I'm just putting glue on this, wood glue, because it is a little porous on the ends. And when that dries, I'll sand it, and then the paint won't just soak in. I find that that does help sometimes. And some of the balsa wood is quite porous. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking wooden dowels, and these are hardwood, and I'm sharpening them with a pencil sharpener at the ends. And this is going to be the posts and the legs for this particular bed. And I'm also going to sharpen the post on the leg. I'm not going to raise this one with beads. Instead, and there I am sharpening. I just have a still picture every now and then so you can just see what I'm doing. I'm going to use the beads on top of the posts this time instead of as legs, as I did for the dressing table that I made before. I'm just sanding the posts and the sides a little bit to make them a little straighter. I just want to make sure that they fit flush against the side. And I measured the ends so that they would all be the same height from the floor. And I'm using 600 grit sandpaper here. I found that if I use a heavier grit, it can shred the balsa wood. It's about as heavy as I use on it. Sometimes I use 1,000 grit to smooth it off, and that's usually between paint layers. So here's the legs for the footboard and the posts. Just making sure that it's flat on each end so those posts will fit flush. Now I'm just sanding where I put all that wood glue on the top, making sure it's smoothed out. It'll be easier to paint this way too. And sometimes the glue gets a little hard, so these are just diamond grit files that I can use to make sure it gets smoothed down enough. And that one was giving me a little trouble, so I had to cut a little more off. And I'm using a combination of wood glue and super glue to put these on so it'll dry fast and I can work with it right away. So I put a little bit of super glue, a little bit of wood glue, a little bit of super glue, a little bit of wood glue stuck them together, and there they are. Now these are just pieces of scrap balsa wood to cover that foam board, so it neatens it up. And like I said, it's a 1/2 inch thick, so it's pretty good size thickness for a foam board. I like to use these scraps up though, and no one's going to see it. And I just glued them on, pinned them in place until the glue dries. And I'm using DAP wood glue as usual. My favorite wood glue. Thing about it doesn't have an awful smell to it. I think some of the other ones smell pretty terrible. So I'm drilling holes in the ends of the posts because I'm going to put a bead and a pin in for decorative ending on it. And I'm just using one of those micro drills to do that. And you don't have to go in too far. I went in, I'm going to be clipping the pin. Okay, now I'm going to cut the ends on both sides where you see me trimming it, because it has to fit around those rounded posts. And I have to do that on the footboard and the headboard. And it looks a little rough, but no one's going to see it in the end, so it will be our secret. I'm actually going to glue the mattress right onto this bedboard that holds the mattress. It won't be coming off again. I won't glue the cover that way, just the mattress. Okay, I'm just going to give these another little bit of a drill just to make sure there's no debris in those little holes. You can see from the top how tiny they are. And there's the other. That's it. And I'm giving it the first coat of paint, which is a thin coat. I water it down for the first coat and it sinks in. And then I'll usually sand it a little bit. It usually does need a little sanding, and then I'll give it a thicker coat of paint afterwards, after it's dry. That seems to work on wood fairly well for me. Of course, this furniture is pretty lightweight, and I'm sticking with that style of caged Strombecker furniture that was so popular for middle-class people in the 1930s. Wealthier people, of course, would buy the more realistic furniture for their children, and where the doors opened and things had moving parts. And mine don't really have any of that. Mine's, you kids could play with this. I mean, if I made them a little bit sturdier, probably be better, harder wood and that sort of thing. I want them to look like they can be played with. Now that pot was just a matte pot, and I actually painted it and dipped it in triple thick, and that's just to show you. There isn't any real glaze on it, but the triple thick acted like a real glaze. So, and that's going on the dresser when all is done. And I'm taking a finer grit paper, sandpaper, 1000 grit, and I just went around the whole thing and smoothed it out. And I'm mixing more paint. And as I've said before, I have a color memory for some reason. Probably a good thing since I am a painter in oils and an illustrator, so I can match paint pretty quickly. And this is just a combination of the bright golden red that Golden Paint puts out, and antique white from Apple Barrel. And it's just, it gives a nice old rose color. Of course, my lighting is kind of bright here, so it is a little bit darker than what you see here. Now I'm giving it that second coat. Doesn't look like I'm going to have to give it a third coat. I will do a little sanding even so after this dries. Now, I'm painting that frame that I discussed the last time, and I made a whole bunch of these little frames out of epoxy resin. And I painted it blue, but it didn't show up against that blue wallpaper, so I'm just painting it the same pink and putting the picture back in. And I will go ahead later and accent it with some chrome gold. And I'll do another little frame, but I just thought I'd show what I did. Whenever I have extra epoxy after using it, I push it into molds. So I have a whole bunch of these frames, and I'm going to start using them. I'm just touching up that bed a little bit, and I'll glue that frame back over that picture. Now I'm making the end table, and the end table is going to be similar to the ones I made for the master bedroom earlier, that's in blue, for her mother and father. This is a teenage girl's bedroom that I'm making this furniture for. And this is going to be her little table where her lamp is, and she can keep her cup of tea and a book there. And this is a very simple construction. I'm using the same dowels, and I'm going to sharpen the ends with a pencil sharpener just like I did for the bed. I'm just cutting out the ends and I'll fit them in right over the dowels. I'm just pushing them in to mark them because balsa wood's so soft you can do that. And just cutting out the circle where the leg is going to fit in. And this is going to be the piece that goes below the top. So it'll have a little, two spaces, two shelves, top and a shelf underneath. It's just so simple to make this. And I'll just glue these together and I'll have a end table. And of course these are 1/12 size. I'm trying to keep everything at 1/12 and trying to be careful about the sizing. Sometimes when I make this furniture, some things look a little too small and some things look a little too big, even though I've measured carefully beforehand. So I don't know. But it all seems to work out in the end. So I'm just giving them each 6 turns in the pencil sharpener to get the same size leg at the bottom. I was going to try to put the sides on this, and I changed my mind and just decided to do an open bottom on it. So there's an open shelf below the top. And I'll go around and sand after the glue is dry so that the legs don't stick up over the top. And I'm just putting it on some foam board so that I can hold it in place. And taking off the excess glue with a paintbrush so I don't have to deal with that later. Try to sand it off if I get too much on any area. And then the shelf will go underneath, hooked to the legs the same way the top is. Now the bed is dry and I'm taking this rub-on decals, just like I used on the dressing table, and putting it on the headboard and the footboard. And I tried to find these decals this week, and I did go back into my purchases, and I purchased this well over a year ago, and they're no longer available, this particular design. So people were asking me about it. Yeah, maybe Amazon will bring it back at some point. I don't know. Maybe they could be found on Etsy from a seller who's selling them. I don't know. Or if you go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby, maybe they still carry something very similar. But anyway, they aren't available anymore, sorry to say. So I ran out of them, and I'm not going to be putting these decals on the dresser. So now these are going up at the top of each bedpost, and I dipped the pins in pink paint, just like the rest of the paint that I'm using, so that it'll match. And then I'm gluing in the bead and the pin right into the top with super glue. And it's the gel control super glue, so it doesn't run. I use a lot of this stuff. And there it is. So you see the glass bead on the top has been painted. I dipped that in paint and let it dry. And there's going to be one on each post. So this same bead is on the dressing table for feet and on the bed as a decorative item on top of the post. And there it is. It's finished. Now it needs a mattress. And that's what it looks like from the side with the legs and from the front. I'm just putting together that little table, and that's it. Just putting the shelf underneath, glued it. And I'm not putting any decals or anything on it, just painting it. I'll give it a couple coats of paint, let it dry, and then sand it, and then paint it again. Put that extra thin layer first so you don't get a bunch of brush strokes. Let it dry, sand it, and then paint it again with a thicker coating. And there's what it looks like. Very easy to make. And that's another frame that I made, and there was the mold. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint another picture and put some gold accents on it all the way around. I had that little picture of a wild rose. That might be a Martha Washington rose, actually. It might not be a wild rose. I used to grow a lot of roses, but the Japanese beetles kill them so much where I am, I don't grow them much anymore. There it is. And I did the same for the other picture, so that will be in the teenage girl's room as well. Now I'm starting the dresser. And this dresser is going to be a little plainer, but I think it's going to work out better because I've got an awful lot of decorative stuff on the furniture as it is. So I think this will fit better in with the scheme and not have so many flowers on everything in the room. Give the eye a rest. These are the sides that I'm cutting out. One on either side. The piece in the middle is not a side. And it'll have two drawers at the top that are separate and then two bigger drawers below it. And it'll be on rounded legs. And that's just the front and back, and then the top and the sides. These drawers will not open. And that's okay with me. I don't want this stuff to look ultra realistic. I want it to look like it's a toy. And that's where the appeal is to me, especially with this older furniture from the 1920s and 1930s. And so I'm trying to keep it simple. I'm just pinning it in place to let it dry. And that's basically the body of the dresser. And we'll just get that in there, let it harden up, and then that can be sanded. Make sure I get everything nice and even. Make sure everything closes up. There's no gaps. Now, of course, if you have hardwood, you can't use pins like this. That's the advantage of this balsa wood that I'm using. Of course, you could make a dresser out of foam board too. I haven't made a foam board dresser, but I've made other things out of foam board, and you can make it look like wood. That's the top, and it'll overlap a little bit over the front and the sides. And I'm just nicking off the sharp edges to make it look like it, it's not just so clean cut. And that's going on the top, and I'll wipe that glue off the back. And these are going to be the drawer fronts. Just trimming them up to make sure that they're they're all cleanly and evenly cut, and sanding each drawer front so that they're a little bit rounded on all sides. Just a little bit. Of course, you could go too far with this and then have to start over. So I had to keep sanding, looking at it, and sanding it to make sure that I didn't do too much. Otherwise, it would look uneven. And there's one of the bigger drawers and the other bigger drawer for the bottom. Or the top, I don't know. You'll see. I'll arrange them. The two little ones go on top. And these are the drawer pulls. And they're just larger pins. They're actually quilting pins. And the legs are going to be wooden beads with another quilting pin put through it. And they'll be all painted all pink, just like the dresser. And I'll glue them with some super glue so that they don't spin around. And I'm just poking them into the end. And then I'm just seeing where the drawers will go. I'll have to paint this first. I made the mattress just out of some cotton, and I stuffed it with cotton, and I glued it onto the base of the bed. And that's the cover, but I haven't ironed it yet. And I made the pillows and the trim. Now I'm just putting another coat of paint on, just to make sure that everything is coated evenly. And then I'll have to sand it. I'm painting the legs. And now I'm going to do the drawer fronts. I'm just putting pins in the side so I can keep them from getting my fingerprints on them. And I'm just going to paint them all the way around. Putting them in a place where they can dry, where they won't touch each other. Doesn't take very long for that paint to dry. And I'm giving it another sanding all the way around. Try to make everything as smooth as possible. Make it look like it's solid wood. And I'm going to place those drawer fronts on so I can see how they're going to go, how they should be spaced. And give them a little sand here and there. And then once these are glued on, I'm going to paint it again. So after the drawer fronts are put on. Okay. And I'm just going to adjust them so that they're evenly spaced. Put the top drawers in. And then the final piece. Make sure everything is where it should be. And now I'm just going to stick these pins in with another little bead in between the glass head of the pin and where I push it in so it looks like a drawer pull. And it's a little tube bead that I've used before, and I found the shortest pieces that I could so that I could do that. Now here's the last coat of paint. I might have to sand it again, a little bit here and there. And the legs are painted. And I'm holding it I glued some cardboard in the center, heavy cardboard, so that it wouldn't warp. Okay, and I'm just going to stick these right in with that bead behind them. I have the beads to the right in that little paint tray. I'm not even trimming these pins, I'm just pushing them all the way through. There. And now they have drawer pulls, and that dresser is finished. Okay. Here's the bedspread and the mattress, a pillow I made, 2 pillows. These are going to be the curtains. I used freight check to make them. It's going to be an attic bedroom, but the images that I'm going to show you are images inside of a forced perspective box. But this is the wallpaper, and most of the furniture and furnishings in here are what's going to appear in that attic bedroom for a teenage girl. And there's my little teenage girl doll. I'm not sure where she's from. She's made in Germany, but I don't know how old she is. She looks like she fits into the 1930s. The little ballerina is from the 1950s. It's a pin. And she has her kitty on her bed with her. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making this video. Please like and subscribe. Bye-bye.